Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just got into the huge SEC games that went on, and we had Ole Miss and we had Alabama get huge wins and set themselves up very, very nicely for a CFP run towards the last couple of weeks of the season. Georgia's still very much in it. LSU likely out of the race as of this moment. But let's get into the upset alerts. All around the country, we had a number of different upsets that really shook up the CFP race, and probably none more than the one that happened down there in Atlanta, Georgia, and what a performance from this Georgia Tech defense to start this off. I mean, you have a Miami offense that is so hard to stop pretty much every which way from Tuesday, and they had moments in the second half where it felt like maybe they were starting to put things together, maybe they were going to be a problem down the way, and maybe they were going to do the thing that they've done so many different times, but they finally got burned. They've been playing with fire for the last about 5 weeks against Virginia Tech, against Cal, against Duke last week. A number of different teams that had the ability to possibly get this done had come up a little bit short, and Georgia Tech was able to get it done, really because this defense was up to the challenge pretty much all day. And really, it came in the most bizarre quarterback situation I've seen in quite some time at Georgia Tech, because Haynes King got 48 snaps in this one. Aaron Philo got 17. They both had a touchdown passing. Haynes King added 93 yards and a score on the ground. It was a very, very interesting game plan from Buster Faulkner offensively, and it worked at different moments, didn't work at other moments, but it definitely worked when they were running the football. 48 carries, 271 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, and they were all over the place. And the misdirection of this Georgia Tech offense did Miami in. They were very, very confused, and it led to a ton of open run lanes, a ton of jet sweeps that got open, a lot of really incredible things, and it shows you just how good Buster Faulkner is at putting together an offense and setting up his team for success. And then on the other side of the ball, Cam Ward did just about everything that he possibly could do in this game. Had 300 yards, had 3 touchdowns, did make a couple of mistakes, including the fumble you're seeing right there, but at the end of the day, he did just about everything he could. 24 carries for 88 yards is just not going to be able to get it done. That's the reality of this Miami team, is if they're going to be one-dimensional, which they absolutely have the capability of being, you're going to be in a really bad spot. That's just the reality of who Miami is. So you're going to have to find a way to get that run game going, at least give people the semblance that you're going to be able to run on them, because Georgia Tech was not fearful of that at all. They were able to sit back and cover just a little bit more, and they made a number of different plays in this game, especially even just a ton of coverage sacks. It felt like Cam Ward was trying to find someone open, and he just couldn't, and Georgia Tech was able to get home. It wasn't like their defensive line was totally outmanning the Miami offensive line. They just had plenty of time to find their way to the quarterback. So Miami takes a tough loss here. Obviously, a lot of things that they need to figure out, and maybe they just needed a loss to really whip everything back into shape. But for Georgia Tech, this is a massive win for this program. It puts them in bowl eligibility, shows Brent Key is building something at Georgia Tech, which, if you've seen him play in these types of games, you kind of already know that. But at the end of the day, you got NC State, then Georgia to finish. Let's say you beat NC State, you lose to Georgia, which is relatively likely at this very moment. 7-5 in a bowl game is a huge win for 2024 for Georgia Tech, and they can continue building forward. They have a really solid recruiting class coming in, and this is probably the win that fully keeps that intact. And then for Miami, puts you in a weird spot, no doubt about that. I do believe if you win out, especially if, let's just say this, if you win out and Clemson loses to Pitt next weekend, you go in with no danger. You have no tiebreakers. You have no craziness to deal with. If Clemson were to beat Pitt, then you have a little bit of a tiebreaker craziness. I do believe that Miami would win out in that scenario, but I'll look into it tonight, get back with a little bit of a report tomorrow. But the CFP hopes are in danger, no doubt about that. You got to beat Wake Forest. You got to beat Syracuse. You lose one of those games, you're in a lot of trouble. Maybe you still make it to the ACC title and find a way to win it, but at the end of the day, you would officially be on the hot seat, and it could just be Pitt that ends up jumping you and getting to the championship. So a lot of different things happening over there at Miami and putting them in a really bad position, but you win out. I think you still make the ACC title. You win it, you're still in. So everything's still on the table, but this was a hit that was probably coming at some point, and Georgia Tech was able to give it to them this past weekend. And then we got Iowa State. Their entire season has fallen apart in 8 days, and I hate to see it. I got to be totally honest. I'm a big Cyclones guy. Love Matt Campbell. Love the energy around that program. But when you allow over 500 yards, 200 on the ground and through the air, you're not going to win a lot of games. You'll find that. But Jalen Daniels had 363 total yards, 3 touchdowns in this game. Alongside him, Devin Neal topped 100 yards rushing, 2 scores. Quentin Skinner had 100 yards receiving and a score. It was remarkable what this offense did for Kansas, and it felt like they could just do no wrong in this game. So Iowa State's obviously got a lot of stuff to figure out, and they did plenty wrong in this game. But the only flaw for the Iowa State offense really was the run game in this one, and it was somewhat circumstantial with how this game unfolded. But 24 carries, 78 yards, and 1 touchdown, and a long carry of 15 yards. So it's obviously a little bit worse than that on a down-to-down basis, but they broke one and were able to make that number look a little bit better. So really, really tough. And it puts Iowa State in a very, very bad place going forward, especially with the Colorado win this past weekend, which we'll get into here in the next segment. You're now in a position where you need to win out and you need Colorado to drop one. I still think you would have the tiebreaker if you were to get to that place where you both had 2 losses and you were fighting it out. But as of right now, you're in a really, really tough spot. And for Kansas, this is a huge win. A very fun win. Gives them a little bit of an ability to feel good about themselves heading into the offseason. But you have the ability to continue spoiling. You're at BYU this weekend, then Colorado comes to town. Maybe you just get 3 straight wins and totally mess up the entirety of the top of the Big 12. But then for Iowa State, you don't control your own destiny anymore. Like I said, you got to beat KSU, hope for an extra loss from Colorado, and then win that game in Arlington. But a quick crash down to earth for Iowa State, and now you got a lot of questions as you head forward into the rest of this season. Then we had Pitt go down to Virginia, and yet again, another team that their entire season has fallen apart in the matter of 8 days. It was absolutely insane to watch, but here we are. It was one of those teams that it felt like everything was going incredibly well. It felt like everything was falling into place, but just wasn't quite enough against Virginia on Saturday, and there were a couple of calls that I don't necessarily love, but that's a conversation for another time. But the Pitt offense averaged 4.7 yards per attempt, 4 yards per carry in this one. The yards per carry was helped by a 34-yard carry by Desmond Reed really late in this game, so it was not a pretty day. And when they had a chance to win it, they had an INT from Nate Yarnell, who actually came in for Eli Holstein in this game. So a lot of things going wrong for that Pitt offense. It feels like they are kind of floundering right now. And they're floundering at the very worst time, because if they were able to bounce back, get this win, and then head into that Clemson game, you would have every ability to win that game and possibly be right back in the ACC title discussion. But right now, you're in a really bad spot going forward. And then for Virginia, the most impressive thing to me was they got 15 carries from Xavier Brown. They got 12 from Kobe Pace. They got 14 from Anthony Colandrea. They had 7 players catch a pass. It was not explosive. It was not special. It was not a ton of big-time plays. But they got the ball down the field, and it was really incredible to watch. It was a game plan that was really just about gutting it out, and that's exactly what they did. So a huge win for Virginia. It gives them a real shot at bowl eligibility. You got at Notre Dame, SMU, and at Virginia Tech to win it. So you got to win one of those. They are going to be a dangerous team in all 3 of those. Frankly, I'd be surprised if that Notre Dame-Virginia game did not come up on upset alerts later in the week. But obviously, we will get to that. But overall, you win one more game, you go bowling, and Tony Elliott's team feels like it's kind of heading in the right direction. For Pitt, this is a huge one to lose. No doubt about that. If they had the ability to win, they're walking into Clemson with a real shot at the ACC title still. Now it feels like that is a distant memory. After Clemson, they have at Louisville, they have Boston College. Even if they win that Clemson game, I still think they're in a really tough position and still could be on the outside looking in at the end of the day. It was a very, very fun run from Pitt, and I think they're a very talented team and a program that's heading in the right direction, especially with Eli Holstein at quarterback. But as of right now, you're just missing the mark a little bit. As of right now, you're just not quite at the place you need to be, and I do think there will be openings in 2025, but definitely a tough finish to a really promising season at least a couple of weeks ago. And then we had this one. This is the one that Indiana needed. I know a lot of people are worried about Indiana. I'm right there with you, and I'll talk about that tomorrow. I'll talk about that a little bit more deeply as we go through this. But the reality is, you need one of these games. There's never been a team that has been able to win a national title just beating everyone by 21 points. That has never happened. LSU kind of did that in 2019, but just in general, they did have the fight against Alabama. But overall, there are a lot of different ways that teams have to win games. There are a lot of different ways that they're just going to have to adapt to situations and not be playing their best football and then find a way to win. There's so many different things that have to happen for a team to win a national title. One of them is beating a team that you should beat by more, by 5 points. Some of them are, winning on a last-second field goal. Some of them, like Texas last year against Kansas State, stopping them in overtime on a 4th and goal just to get a win. That stuff has to happen. It shows you where you are. It shows you who you are. And sometimes it whips that team into shape so they can finish strong. It's really, really one of those things that you see this game and it's easy to be like, okay, so Indiana is who we thought they were. Indiana is the team that hasn't played any one. They finally play a physical team with a pulse and they're not able to keep up. And maybe that is part of this. I do think that holds a place in this. But the reality is being able to mentally bounce back from that and handle that business is really, really impressive. And Curtis Rourke had his probably toughest day of the year, to be totally honest with you, but was able to pick up the slack for a run game that had 40 yards on 28 carries. He went 17 for 28, 206 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an INT. He was not perfect by any means, but he did just about everything for this offense in a lot of different ways, and it was not a pretty day from this offense, but you got a quarterback that can definitely get the job done. And then for Michigan, you did a really good job getting yourself back in this game. 3 straight scoring drives, although one was off a pick and only 4 yards. You had 3 straight scoring drives, got it to a 2-point game, and then went backward on the next drive, narrowly missed a 4th and 10 on the other. So you had your chances, no doubt about that, and it feels like kind of a microcosm of the Michigan season more than anything else. Hopefully you can flip Bryce Underwood and everything changes around there, but as of right now, it's a really, really tough product to watch for Michigan's offense, but Indiana got the win. That's what's important. I have big worries about this offensive line against a physical defensive line because you got a really physical one, maybe even a better one than you just faced coming up in a couple of weeks, but you dodged the bullet, and that's what everyone that has ever won a Big Ten title, everyone that's ever gone to the CFP has had to do. They were able to do it in this one, and now you move forward with your undefeated season intact. Now you have a huge bye week that is so helpful. Then it's Ohio State, and it's one of those things where I'm still wondering if they get rolled by Ohio State, if they lose by 14 points, are they on the outside looking in? I'm starting to believe that's probably more and more the case. But we'll find out on Tuesday where they sit and all the craziness, and we'll find out, are they going to be a team kind of on the chopping block? But for Michigan, the nightmare season gets worse, and that's just going to be the way it is pretty much the rest of the way. You should be able to get a win over Northwestern to get bowl eligible, but then Ohio State comes to town. And frankly, if you can win that game, all this season is fixed. I'll be totally honest. Every Michigan fan would be more than fine. They'd be moving into 2025 with all the hope in the world. You lose it, and then you got some questions. And definitely one of those games where you fully expect Michigan to lose that game. So a very frustrating season for Michigan, no doubt about that. And then you had Miami go down. Finally, they they've been playing with fire for quite some time. They got burned, and it happens to just about everyone, especially in a year like this. But you be able to bounce back, get to the ACC title, and win it, you'll be more than fine. But obviously, a situation that Miami did not want to be in, and now we're going to have to figure out how they find their way out of it. But still a lot of really, really great things that they can do this season, along with Indiana, still very much in the mix and really just able to get out with a win in the grossest possible circumstances. Kind of shows you just how tough that team is. But we'll get into all the craziness over the next couple of days. But let's take our second break here. And when we come back, we got to get into the Big 12. They had 2 huge performances this past weekend from Colorado and BYU in 2 very different styles. And we'll break it down and how it affects the Big 12 race right after this.